What's going on, everybody? This is While You Were Loading, episode 3. Next to me, I have Jenna. To the other side of me, I have Brandon and Zach. So this week, we have quite a few interesting topics, but I'm going to throw it off to Zach for the first topic because it is interesting. We're going to be talking about horror.
Yeah, so this idea kind of came to me, and I was thinking about it for a little while after the Resident Evil 7 trailer and demo kind of got revealed. And can third-person horror games still be scary? Mm-hmm. Just because everything we're seeing now is first-person, at least a large majority of what we're seeing now is first-person. And we're kind of in a renaissance for horror, again, because of that reason, too. But if you look back to the older horror games, they're almost entirely third-person. And I'm curious to see what you guys think about whether or not they can still be effective. We were kind of all talking about Until Dawn prior to the show starting, and how that kind of broke the mold, I guess, as far as recent trends go. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious to see what you guys think about it.
Okay, well, I was going to say, so obviously first person is like what most horror games now have fallen into, and I think actually a large part of that is due to like the popularity it gives on YouTube. Yeah. We were talking, Until Dawn I think really works well as a third person, and I think for me it's because of the way it is, like the style of the game, the fact that it has this heavy butterfly effect, and I felt like I was on edge the whole time, holding my breath, like whatever I decide to do is going to affect the entire rest of the game, and I can't go back. And I think having that burden on my shoulders and not seeing it from a first person, but seeing actually everything unfold like as an outsider, I think that worked really well for that game.
It's good that you mentioned like the burden aspect and just the decision making putting you on edge, because I think that lends itself to one of what I would consider like a core factor of what makes a horror game horror, what makes it a good horror game in general, and that's kind of like the unease or the uneasiness in the unknown. You don't know what's going to happen around this corner or that corner, and you don't know which decision is going to affect what happens on later on. And I think that gives itself its own tension, and that's a very, very good starting point for how a game can be formed in a horror vein. Yeah,
and actually seeing the character react to it, I think it works. I don't think it would work the other way around. If you were a first person playing Until Dawn that style, I don't think it would be as successful.
Interesting that you bring it up, saying it's not going to be as successful, because it's pretty much been confirmed that Until Dawn is going to be coming to VR. So you are going to be able to play Until Dawn with a PlayStation VR headset.
In a sense.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be the exact game. I think it's going to be kind of like the add-on thing they have where it was kind of like a rail shooter for it. Yeah. Not necessarily a rail shooter, but it's going to be the same kind of monsters and stuff like that, same kind of concept, but singular character, I'm going to imagine.
It seems like more of a haunted house / like roller coaster simulator with possible rail shooting. Yeah. That's what it seems to be. So it's less in the vein of the initial Until Dawn, and it's more so using like canon characters.
So probably more like what we saw from E3 with Resident Evil 7 then.
In a sense, yeah. I think it's funny that you bring up Resident Evil 7 too, because the new one is such a big departure, and you were talking about beginning hour already and stuff like that. The switch to the first person seems to have stemmed completely from, I shouldn't say completely, but in large part due to PT being canceled. Yeah. Or Silent Hills.
And the success of it, too.
Yeah, PT is
the most downloaded demo in PlayStation history.
And it's considered, by many to be the best horror game that's come out in a decade, and it's not even a game, it's a demo. Yeah. And it was leading up to what could be a revolutionary game for horror. Bringing it back to the mainstream in a sense.
See, and I haven't played PT, so I'm not... I remember looking on Twitch and seeing it like in the top, 10 games being streamed consistently, so I'm not too familiar with PT.
Yeah.
Every time you play it, it's different. It was...
Really?
Yeah, it was procedurally generated, randomized and everything. There was a few encounters that were kind of planned out in the beginning, and then from there, things get crazy, in a sense.
Yeah, and you kind of have to solve a puzzle that you don't know that there's clues to. I don't know if that's really the right way to explain it, but say you hit the trigger where the entire room becomes green, or the hallway becomes green. You have to go, okay, if I don't want to die right here, I have to do A, B, and C.
Yeah.
And then the door opens up and you go through and then something else is different and then you have to hit these triggers to continue.
Bunch of stuff.
Which, that's an interesting way to, I think, maybe do a horror game where it's a locked room horror. I think that'd be interesting.
So more like a small sandbox type of
Yeah.
experience.
Ooh, yeah.
So the style of the new Resident Evil, do you think it could be just as successful, but if they kept with a third person?
I think Silent Hill, as initial Silent Hill, so you could say up to the first 4 games or so for this whole series, basically proves that it's successful. Because in a sense, the way that the reason PT cultivated such a horrific feeling was, on top of like the unease and the unknown that I was mentioning, this tension built on by sound effects and visuals and just pacing, and this is all stemming from Silent Hill. Like that was key to what Silent Hill was known for, and I think if they were to kind of incorporate that back into a third person feel, I think it'd be just as successful. I just think, like you were saying, the success of first person horror in today's video game market doesn't make it a contemporary contender to be third person as of yet.
Yeah, and I think being first person too, now I'm thinking about it, because you said, it's a cheaper way to kind of make it. That in a sense, but then if you think about it, because you don't have to animate the character in this much extra space, you can put all that budget into making your monster designs that much more terrifying. You can put that much more money into sound and lighting and everything too. Where having to have someone, or a team of people animate running, walking, being hit by something, all these animations, you can just put that into creating your world. So, I mean, there's pros and cons to this, though.
When it's first person, the immersion's already there. I think the reason why Until Dawn did it successfully is because, again, like, you have to make those decisions. So you're in that game. There's those quick time events. You have to be paying attention to that game. You are immersed in that game when you're playing it. Like, you don't just kind of like step away from it and pause it. It's one of those games that really draws you in, just like a first person would, just in a different way.
It's approaching the same basic structure through different means, in a sense. Yeah, I totally understand where you're coming from.
I think when we're comparing first person to third person, too, a big factor is mechanics. Because if I look back at like Resident Evil 4, for example, I can't play it now, but at the time it was groundbreaking. Like, I remember the mechanics in that it was very sluggish, but it felt real, it felt natural. And that was like, it's over the shoulder, so that's considered third person.
The fact that it forced you to stop moving to shoot.
Exactly.
That was a big thing.
Exactly.
Because you couldn't be shooting and then running. If you had to either fight or flight.
Yeah. Slow the gameplay down quite a bit.
Yeah, which for 7, there was just an interview with one of the lead designers saying that that's a big part of this one too, where it's either hide or fight. Okay. You don't get to choose both.
Okay. So that in and of itself will help with overall tension in the game, and then
absolutely.
I mean that was like when you were talking about Silent Hill. That was a thing that I specifically remember with Silent Hill and Resident Evil, like probably 10 years ago. Where they're battling back and forth about which game had better sound design, which game had better mechanics. And I remember, like, that's when we were getting probably some of the best horror games that I didn't really play because I wasn't into horror. But I do specifically remember Silent Hill at least having great sound design. Because, I mean, it's something that it would play, like, when I worked at GameStop, it would play in the background and stuff like that. When they have game demos playing. And so I specifically remember Silent Hill and Resident Evil being two.
I mean, yeah, there's sound effects in Silent Hill that are just like Pavlovian. Like, I'll hear the main theme, the first 2 notes of it, and I get chills. Because it's like, oh no, I'm being transported.
Yeah.
It's bad. it gets bad. But yeah, that's a series that I think, if for some reason they were able to pick it back up, I think that would do well regardless of first and third person.
So what do you guys think about games like Evil Within from a year ago then?
It's got really good enemy design, and the enemies can look very terrifying. It falls into the same kind of thing as what Dead Space 2 and 3 fell into, where it's technically a horror game, but it's more action.
Very heavily based on action, to the point where, in my opinion, it masked any kind of aspect of horror. The creatures were horrific. There were some bosses in the game that were
remember the first trailer coming out for that and being like, that's really disturbing.
Yeah.
And then I played it, I was like, okay, yeah, I mean, this is still like, if I just saw this in my room in the middle of the night, I'd probably crap my pants. But it's not, the situations in the game didn't really hammer in how terrifying the monsters were.
It was kind of the same vein of a Resident Evil 4 in a sense, where everything is scary around you, but you're overpowered to the point of it kind of shadowing it. So, yeah.
See, I think 4 that wasn't as much. 5, I would say, yeah.
5 completely changed it, but 4 was the beginning of the end of that style.
Yeah.
As of right now. Yeah.